President Trump confirming phone calls with both Russian President Vladimir Putin and Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky, saying that peace talks will start immediately to end the war in Ukraine. What would an end to the war mean for investor sentiment and also energy trade? Should we see a lifting of sanctions on Russia? Joining me now to discuss, we've got General Wesley Clark, the chairman and CEO of Wesley K. Clark and Associates. General, great to speak with you. Thanks for making time. Given your experience in negotiations here, what can you tell us about what these negotiations might start to look like here?
Well, I think there's going to be a lot of give and take, and I think the Ukrainians and the Europeans are going to demand to be involved. Obviously, there's going to be some back and forth between the United States and Russia. That's inevitable in this case. The Europeans are going to they're going to step up to this because they know that their security is really on the line here. I think they are heeding what the administration is saying, what Secretary Hegseth said yesterday about the fact that they've got to do more. They've got to take the lead in this in helping Ukraine defend itself. When I talk to the Ukrainians, of course, they all know what was said yesterday, and they're determined to make it work, and they're determined to protect themselves. So there's a lot of strength in the negotiating position.
Yeah, there certainly is. No, sorry for interrupting there. I just wanted to jump in because it's been interesting hearing Pete Hegseth's comments calling Ukraine joining NATO unrealistic. How do you think that could impact negotiations moving forward?
Well, it would have been better if he hadn't said that publicly. He was, after he went off the camera, the minister said, please keep these comments. Let's talk about it amongst ourselves first before you go public with it. But he did. Okay, it's out there. It's a starting point. It's something that could have been protected, but we got to move on from here. What's done is done.
Okay, well, if what's done is done, then talk to me about the path forward. What's the timeline look like?
I think really the sticking points here are, first of all, how the security force is structured. What is the security guarantee? What's the U.S. role in this? The U.S. has to be the backbone of this. We don't have to have troops on the ground. And it would have been better if it were NATO, but it doesn't have to be NATO. But it does have to have U.S. Intelligence, U.S. logistics, U.S. air support, and perhaps fire support to back up the European forces that are there. Now, right now, the Europeans really don't have the manpower in uniform to do the mission the way President Zelensky thinks it needs to be done. They don't have 150,000 troops they can put in there and then rotate and stay on the line. So that's got to be worked. And then there's the issue of the sanctions. Are sanctions going to be released against Mr. Putin? Is Europe going to, again, become dependent on Russian oil and gas after what's happened? And then how will that affect the security guarantees for Ukraine? And then there's the 250,000 abducted Ukrainian children. There's reparations. There's war crimes that have been committed. So as you move from a ceasefire into something more permanent, which the administration says we want something that's sustainable, you're going to have to not only stop the fighting, but you're going to have to serve justice. And the fact is that Russia was the aggressor here. This is not two boys on the schoolyard who were swinging at each other and you take them to the principal. This is an aggressive move by Russia. It started a major war, unprovoked, in Europe, and there have to be consequences for that.
I want to talk about the lifting of those sanctions in the context of some news from this morning. Russia offering more LNG to India. India saying they're willing to buy. Coming in potentially with gifts today for the president as Modi is expected to meet with President Trump this afternoon. What can you tell me about what that example I just gave tells you about the path forward for sanctions getting lifted? Is it going to be a slow drip where we see certain countries getting in on Russian gas? Or is it something more that's going to look like more of a groundswell of change?
Well, I think if it's a groundswell change, I think the odds of a sustainable peace are lower. So I think it has to be a very slow drip, drip, drip. In this case, there's always been a ruble-rupee connection for India buying and then reselling Russian hydrocarbons. LNG would be no different. The fact that President Modi is going to meet with President Trump today, I hope that'll be on the agenda. I hope President Trump will use his bargaining leverage to keep it under control. Because what we want to do is assure that Mr. Putin isn't incentivized to continue the attack. You know, the danger behind this is the Russian ministries have said, well, you've got to address the underlying conditions. Those underlying conditions of conflict that Russia saw were NATO being present in many different states, not just Ukraine, and also the fact of Ukraine's existence as an independent country. So if those conditions are not met for Russia, maybe that means Russia wants to continue the fight. Maybe a ceasefire would just give Russia the incentive to rearm. And so keeping those sanctions on, dealing with countries like India correctly, and having them help reinforce to de-incentivize Mr. Putin to continue the aggression, that's an important element of all this. President Trump is an able negotiator. He's got premier power position in the world. I hope he'll use it.
All right, General, thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you.